Welcome to another episode of the Super Dynasty Bros podcast. I'm Ben, and joining me is Austin over here. Today we are going to be talking 2025 rookie running backs, and I'm pretty excited for this one, Austin. I've been involved in previous off seasons where I've done some rookie research and watching the combine and everything like that. But I think with us kind of getting deep into the podcast on this one felt a lot deeper and a lot more fun. What were your thoughts on some of your review?
Man, I don't think I ever remember a specific position in a specific class that's as deep as this 2025 running back class. It is crazy. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Ashton Genty, and we'll talk plenty about him, but it is so much deeper than just him. I think there's legitimately 15 to 20 guys who could have, good NFL careers from this draft class. And I'm not sure they all will because some of them may not get much of an opportunity, but the talent is incredibly deep and top heavy. I mean, like there's some really top heavy, like these guys are legitimate potential stars, and then there's a bunch of different like these guys are great sleeper potentials. A lot of these guys that you're going to see end up going day three and round 6 and 7 are guys that probably would have been RB3 or 4 in last year's draft class. So that's how deep this is, and it's been fun to get into, and we're going to talk about some of them today.
Yeah. I have to agree on the sentiment that I think this rookie class is possibly going to flip the running back landscape on its head. There's the possibility that it doesn't, but there's a lot of running back rooms in the NFL right now that might not survive a rookie RB coming and just taking over the workload. So why don't we go ahead and start off with your guy? I know we're all excited about Ashton Genty, but he's got to be the guy that we talk about first. What were some of the things you saw with Ashton?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an obvious place to start. I mean, we're not really doing like a real ranking here. We're going to kind of go like in order of sort of the amount that they're talked about, the amount that they're potentially projected to go. So, but Ashton Genty is, I mean, you hear this the term generational prospect is so overused, but really this guy is unbelievable. I haven't seen a highlight reel like his. I mean, it is amazing to watch. I think it might be the most impressive film of any player I've watched. And just watching him gash through defenses. Now, granted, a lot of these are lower level competition, but I mean, even against Oregon, I mean, he was running all over them, and they were for a long time considered to be the best team in the country. They were the last remaining undefeated team. So the way he bounces off people, the way he makes people miss, the way he breaks tackles, his speed in the open field. I mean, once he gets past that initial contain, nobody's going to catch him. That combo of power and speed is just kind of unmatched with anybody else in this class. He's only 5'9", which is very, obviously very short, but he's a compact 215. Like he's very sturdy. He can break tackles. He can run between the tackles. I mean, we even saw in a tough game against Penn State, that Penn State defense was kind of holding him in check, but he was able to just kind of fight for a little bit extra here and there, and he ended up over 100 yards. So it's not like he's just going to be a guy that you can only play on the edges or you have to get him in space, but he can create space. He can break tackles. He can get in the gaps. So this is just a guy that is going to fit anywhere. Any team could use Ashton Genty. 2023, he had 1,900 yards, 19 touchdowns, 1,900 total yards, 19 touchdowns, which was a great season, and it already kind of built up some hype for 24, but then obviously 2024 just blew it away. 2,700 total yards, 30 total touchdowns. He only caught 23 passes in 2024, which was a step down from 2023. But he had 374 carries. So you're talking about between the rushes and the catches, almost 400 total touches. But we do know he has the ability to catch the ball because in 2023 he had 43 catches for 569 yards and 5 touchdowns. So capable of being a receiving back, which is obviously very important. And most people are playing in at least half PPR, if not full PPR league. So you want a running back that can catch passes. I think a player comparison I kind of see is Kenneth Walker. I think they're kind of a similar type of player, similar size. But I actually think I like Genty overall as a prospect better than than Walker. Although I think if you had to find a comparison, that's one that I like.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw one online recently, and I was like, actually, I can't get this out of my head now. It was Maurice Jones-Drew back in the day
Ooh,
for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think the size comparison
Mighty
is
Mouse.
definitely a strong one.
Yeah,
And MJD lasted in the league for a good amount of time and was a
yeah,
fantasy stud for years. So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I agree on Judgy. I think, some of the context behind the passing going down in 2024 was that the offense didn't need him to catch the ball as much in 2024.
yeah,
And he actually had elite stats when it comes to catching the ball in 2023.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I love Ashton Judgy, and we could talk this whole podcast about him, but I think everybody's been hearing so much about Genty that
yeah,
some of these other guys are going to get pushed down, and I think that's where we're going to talk about a lot of that today.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't have any other comments on Genty, but kind of moving on to Omari and Hampton. That's where I'm kind of going to take things next. And where the best way that I can describe Hampton is that he is a jack of all trades, master of none. And it's the sense that he is good at everything that you could throw at him on the football field, but he doesn't really have one particular thing that he is the best at or the number one at. But he is a prototypical NFL running back coming into this. And last year he had amazing stats, rushing for over 1,600 yards, and he was also a pretty elite pass catcher too. If I'm looking back here, he had a little over just almost under 400 yards receiving with 38 receptions and 2 touchdowns. So, the pass catching profile is there as far as getting him the ball in space and being able to get him the ball through the air. But he's also just a really physical runner and being able to get into contact with the defenders and being able to get in the open field. And what's surprising about him is you think that with a physical runner that he would be kind of slower and easier to take down in the second half or kind of that next level of the field, but he actually does have really good late speed. And I think that's what really makes him more of a well-rounded running back. I've seen some comps between JT and a little bit of James Conner there with the physicality of it, but he just has that ability to be able to continue in that a little bit more long speed than some of those other physical guys. I think in any other class, Hampton is the 101, but Genty is just the unicorn that's going to have Hampton at the 102. And so you're going to see Hampton slide down as far as the middle of, possibly even the early first round, but as far as rookie drafts, but getting it potentially even into the middle of the first round in rookie drafts. And, I don't think he's really going to slide into the late first round. What were your thoughts on Hampton with that, Austin?
I agree with your analysis. I think he's a guy that is perfectly capable of coming in and being a workhorse back right off the bat. I think he's got all the skills to be an NFL 3-down back. I think a lot of the question with him is landing spot and will he get the opportunity to be a workhorse right off the bat? And I think if he gets into a spot like Dallas or Denver where it looks like they're going to give him the reins, I see him as potentially the 102 in rookie drafts, maybe 103.
Mm-hmm.
But and then if he ends up in some sort of a timeshare situation, I think he ends up 106, 107. But still, I think that he's a clear. I think there's a chance that if he gets the opportunity to be a starting running back, he's going to be the clear RB2 in this class.
Yeah.
And there might be some other guys we'll talk about more later on that have more upside, more explosive, more the ceiling is higher. But I think Omarion Hampton's going to be a very safe NFL running back that's going to hold his value. I think he'll probably jump right in and be a top 15 dynasty running back the second he's drafted. He's a guy, if you have an early first-round pick, to be excited about. If you feel like you're getting ready to contend already and you need a running back and you don't have Genty, I think Hampton's going to do just fine for you.
Yeah. Actually, before the show a couple of days ago, we were talking a little bit about a stat that is pretty cool on PFF, which is the missed tackles forced per attempt. And I would say, looking into it, Hampton's definitely up there. Genty led the class last year with 40% of his touches ending up in a missed tackle forced. But actually, what was cool about Omarion Hampton is the previous year in 2023, he actually led the nation in the amount of missed tackles. And another stat from last season was he was actually sixth in the most tackles missed this season. So he also can create a lot with his feet and being able to get in the open field just like Genty can. He just can't exactly bounce in the way that Genty does, and it has kind of that fluidity that Genty does. But good with his footwork.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on to your guy Caleb Johnson here.
Yeah. So Caleb Johnson is a guy that I really like. I would say that early in the offseason, I kind of just roughly was thinking about what are my running back rankings, and I had him as my RB2. I think I've slipped on him a little bit. I think I probably have him in the 3 or 4 slot now just because I think Hampton's risen. There's been a lot of buzz around Travion Henderson. But I still really like Caleb Johnson, and I think he has a very good chance, if he gets in the right landing spot, to be an incredible NFL player. He's big, he's powerful, he weighs 225 pounds. Reminds me a little bit of Najee Harris. I think that just he could be one of those guys that's just a consistent 1,000-yard rusher. He can do short yardage. He's really good at some of that power running game that I think is going to translate well in the NFL. Did that in the Big Ten against some very strong fronts. Another comparison I saw, I believe it was Ray GQ from DD Fantasy. He said he looks a lot like DeMarco Murray, and I can definitely see that when watching his highlights. His 2024 numbers were obviously far and away better than his other 2 years. He really wasn't on anybody's radar going into the 2024 season. But if you just look at him run, the way he runs, he looks like a pro workhorse. Against the top Big Ten teams, he was able to, put up good games. He doesn't really look that fast when you're watching him, but then you watch him kind of effortlessly pull away on the long runs, and you're like, man, he doesn't even look like he's trying hard, but he's still pulling away. So at that size, to still have that speed to, run away and break a big one, is definitely a plus, because you're looking at him for those hard-nosed short yards, and I do think he's going to probably be in a position where he's not going to be expected to be a pass catching back necessarily. I mean, he's shown that he can catch passes, but I do think that he'll probably initially be a guy that's a short yardage running back. He's gonna he has the home run potential, but he's a hard nosed short yardage guy that I think will be useful right away to any offense. His first 2 years, obviously, like I said, weren't that impressive, but the 2024 numbers of 1,700 total yards and 23 touchdowns in what was a bad offense. I mean, that Iowa offense was not very good this year, so still being able to put up numbers like that, I see a lot of upside here. I definitely think the question with him is, does he end up going late day 2 or even into the day 3 picks? If that happens, I definitely think that hurts his value a little bit. But if he ends up going to a good situation in the second or the third round, I think he's a guy that could definitely end up, in the top half of the first round of rookie drafts.
Yeah. I think some of my concerns with Caleb, and I also am pretty high on him as my RB3, but it kind of tied with the next guy I'm going to talk about, but is just the lack of a little bit of his shiftiness. And he's definitely a very much a north-south runner. So once he gets in the open 100%. Space, he's very hard to stop, but he has a harder time with being able to get past the defender. And I think that's some of the concern. But if he can break some of that or end up in a situation where he has a great offensive line, if he ends up with somebody like the Cowboys or the Chargers, he's golden. So I definitely think Caleb is a great prospect.
If he ends up somewhere that schemes towards his strengths and wants to make him a 3-down back, I think he excels on some of those like outside zone runs. I think that you'll see a team that really wants to make him a workhorse can build their offense in a way that will build to his strengths.
I saw some comps to a little bit of, and when we say comps too, it's not like completely comparing a player directly, right? Yeah. It's just taking some of the things that we see out of a player's game and like seeing shades of that player being able to play similar to a previous NFL back. And one of the players that I really think I see in Caleb is Aaron Jones. His ability, when he breaks off a run, he's taking it to the house. And Caleb had a lot of that at Iowa. And really, he was a huge part of their offense and really what honestly probably got Iowa like 3 or 4 more wins in that season. So
For sure.
he was
For
really the
sure.
only life support on that offense.
Yeah.
Oh man. But a kind of a player that I see is a little bit of the opposite, and maybe the opposite in the sense that he can see the hole a little bit better than Caleb, or at least break it a little bit differently. Is Travion Henderson, and I think Henderson is going to be the most interesting running back from this class. He's kind of a my guy for me. Just I'm definitely going to be taking a lot of him in drafts, but the concerns are there, but he has a lot of upside. And I think during his time at Ohio State, we saw in his freshman year that he was a breakout. I mean, we love to see the breakout age that he was at a very young
Yeah.
age coming into his freshman year to be the sole back for that team. And then you saw 2023, which was kind of a down year. He could have gone to declared the draft and probably would have still ended up as an RB3 or potentially better in that class, but he decided to go back to school and having the clash with him and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield. I think you saw a little bit more of what we're starting to see in the NFL schemes, where Travion played a little bit more of the Jahmyr Gibbs role, or
Yeah.
something along the lines that he was more of the explosive back, and Quinshon was more of really calling to my Lions the David Montgomery of the
David
offense, of
Montgomery.
being able
Yeah.
to be the power back and be able to be the red zone force that he was. I think the concerns that we have with Travion is that he has a harder time breaking tackles or causing those missed tackles that we were talking about earlier. But the thing is, if he has way better vision than a lot of these other running backs that we're going to talk about, and he's able to at least create lanes through his offensive line, and when he's able to break one, he can take it again all the way to the house like Caleb Johnson. But I think with Travion, he has a little bit more of that shiftiness to his game, and he's able to create his lanes a little bit better than Caleb is. But I think the concern's a little bit more there for Travion as far as being able to translate into the NFL. If he can end up in a situation like Jahmyr Gibbs, where he's splitting carries with somebody who is more of the power back and they can scheme him in, that's great. But I think what we see with Travion is he's also got a really, really great pass catching profile. And one of the things that I was actually looking into was that he needs to improve in his pass protection. But when it comes to passing, this last year, he was able to catch for 27 receptions and 284 receiving yards. He was getting 10.5 yards per reception, which is pretty darn great, and they were scheming it up well at Ohio State. But one of the things that he was really good at was he was actually number one in percentage of plays that went for over 10 yards. And so that just goes to show you right there the electricity, the explosiveness of Travion Henderson.
Yeah.
The issue I see with Travion is he could end up as one of the top RBs in the class, or he could flame out and not end up panning out as some of these other guys are. It doesn't have exactly the safety that you're getting with Ashton Genty and Amarian Hampton.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing with him is I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's probably the smallest running back we're going to talk about today. He's right at 200 pounds. I think he's listed 206 or 208, something like that. But a lot of the same concerns that people have had for him are the same concerns we heard about, Gibbs and Achane. So I think that we've seen how they worked out. So I think that there's definitely, if he gets to the right spot, I've seen him mocked multiple times to the Chiefs at the end of the second round, which would be an incredible landing spot. I think that'd be perfect for him. I'm assuming they're probably going to either bring Pacheco or Hunt back. So that'll be the between the two tackles runner, but a guy that can take dump offs from Mahomes. I mean, that's incredible. I think that would be a perfect spot for him. You don't need him to go in there and be a workhorse to make a difference.
Right.
I think it's very interesting, like when you're comparing him and Caleb Johnson, like literally, like you said, they're pretty much polar opposite runners. One's a third-year breakout. It's a big guy, a between the tackles runner, and then the other is he broke out basically as a freshman. He's a small, speedy guy. Obviously, we all remember that screen pass he took to the house right before half against Texas in the playoffs. I mean, the explosiveness, and you see the potential, and you're like, man, the sky is the limit for this guy. And you just hope that he gets into a position where he has has a quarterback and an offensive coordinator that scheme him in such a way that he can be a threat in the pass game. And then you're really, I mean, you're looking at he can make an immediate impact.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes down to decision making for your teams, I think if you're looking for an RB1, I would be a little bit more scared to take Travion Henderson versus a player like Ashton Genty or Marion Hampton, who they're going to be the workhorse backs, but Travion can give you the upside with explosive games if he ends up being what we hope to fruition. So I like the prospect there. I think very good points about the size, Austin, as far as being Jahmyr Gibbs-like or Devon Achane. And it does work out in the NFL. He just has to find the right offense, and those two did.
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about his teammate from last year, Quinshon Judkins, and it's very interesting because I think he might be the purest three down back in this class. I mean, I just think he's a guy that's a team can take him, and he's just a solid player at every really every aspect of the game. Similar to Hampton in the sense of where he's very well rounded. He can catch, he has power, he has speed, he's elusive. I wouldn't say really any of those categories he's the best in the class, but he has skills in all of them. And I think that's something that I think is, if you're looking for just a good, safe, this is a guy that I can just hand the ball to 20 times a game and he will produce. His numbers throughout college were very consistent. He had, through all 3 seasons, he had over 1,000 yards and 15 plus touchdowns. His 2022 with Ole Miss, he had 15, or I forget it was 22. I need to double check that, but I think he's either 20. His biggest year with Ole Miss, he had 1,567 yards on 274 carries. This past year, he only had freshman year. Okay, yeah. So he only had 1,060 yards on 194 carries this year. Seems like a regression in stats, but the yards per carry is actually pretty close. Mm-hmm. He just had 80 less carries. And so he was able to share the load with Henderson. And I actually think Henderson and Judkins show us that both of them can play in their role really well. And I think they both could do that in the NFL. So I think if Judkins goes into a situation where he's going to be, the short yardage, goal line back, consistent, kind of the first and second down back, he's shown that he can catch passes too. But if that's more of his role, he can still produce at a level that is, fantasy relevant without having to be a 3-down back. But I think he's capable of it, just like I think Henderson is capable of producing even if he's in a smaller role because of his pass catching ability. The interesting thing with Judkins is we get to see something with him that we don't get to see with almost anyone else, and we get to see that we got to see him play in both the SEC and the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. So you got to see him play against a wide variety of different defenses. I've been seeing him mocked a bunch in the first round. I've seen him going to Pittsburgh. It seems like he's been trending upwards and going towards in the late first and a lot of mocks, and sometimes in the second. So I definitely think he's going to be good draft capital. I definitely think the narrative with him changes a little bit if the draft capital isn't as good, just because I think the ceiling's not quite as high. I think he's going to need a little bit more volume. But I like him a lot. I kind of see some Joe Mixon in him, the way he runs, the way he's good in short yardage and on the goal line. He's a guy I'm excited about. And I really think those 5 are guys that I think are all, barring something weird happening where they have a huge draft slide, should all be first round rookie picks this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, I think with Quinshon Judkins, you're getting what you're paying for, in the sense that that he's not really the explosive back that Travion Henderson is, but he is the bell cow 3-down back that you would like to see, similar to Hampton. And he could carry an offense I think Pittsburgh would be a great landing spot for him. Similar that, I think he could be a, either equal to or better version of Najee Harris. So I like Quinshon. If he gets the draft capital in the first round, I think he could be a safe first round rookie running back in your rookie draft. Yeah. So the next rookie that I want to talk about here is one that I'm extremely excited about, and I think he sits out of that top 5 that you're saying that we kind of feel pretty safe that they're going to end up being first, day 1, early day 2 running backs in the draft. But Dylan Sampson is probably one of my favorite rookie running backs coming into this with doing a lot of the research that we did. And talk about another player that plays in the Big Ten versus the SEC. He played his years at Tennessee, but played against great competition. And this year he really broke out for 258 carries and 1,400 yards. Was really used on the goal line with 22 touchdowns on the year. And has a little bit with pass catching as well, with 20 receptions, 143 receiving yards. But I think what I see with Dylan Sampson is he ended up splitting the backfield with Jalen Wright the year before. So it was similar to Judkins in the sense that he was able to still be as efficient the year before, just not as great of stats because he had another NFL level running back going into the season his sophomore year. But in his junior season, what I really like to see is if he can end up with the upside of the ceiling of Devon Achane. That is what I see with Dylan Sampson. And it depends on, again, we talk about landing spot. It's all going to depend on where these guys get drafted. But I think where we're really going to see him really shine is in the combine. So I'm really excited to see him in the next couple of weeks when they start to do some of these drills because he has the speed. He actually, I was looking into a lot of things and he has the best in class speed and acceleration out of most of these guys. Travion Henderson probably being the only one to rival that. There's some other guys that we're going to talk about. Another guy that I'm going to end up mentioning later on that is also kind of up there for his speed. But Dylan Sampson is really just the guy that you want to have on your team when it comes to taking it to the house, right? He's going to be, again, another explosive back. We're talking a bunch of these guys. Dylan Sampson would have fit very well into last year's rookie running back class. But he's a little bit undersized. He's 5'11", 200 pounds. So he's not a very heavy guy. But I think what's going to really separate him is his quickness and his burst to the game. He's not really as skilled as some of the other guys, as Genty and as Marion Hampton as far as breaking tackles. But I think Tennessee really gave him a lot of the goal work. He has played against a lot of the top competition, and it has still been a level where he could be a three down back, but has the speed to be able to be that change of pace guy as well. So I don't know how much you looked into Dylan Sampson, Austin, but he's a very exciting player in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, as a Florida fan, watched a lot of SEC games last year. I did see a bunch of him, but I haven't done as deep a dive on his film yet. But I do think that he grades out as a better prospect than Jalen Wright, who a lot of people were talking about as RB 4 or 5 in last year's class. So again, that just goes to show you he may end up going RB 7, 8, 9 in this class. But I think he's a guy that definitely would be ranked higher in a lot of other classes. So I think it's definitely another intriguing prospect. Obviously, he's got a lot of speed, but he has the capability to score on the goal line, and I think that's a lot of what NFL offenses are looking for.
I think the only concern, yeah, for sure. I think the only concern that I've seen online with a lot of other analysts is that they have said that Tennessee's offense is one that does spread the offensive linemen out and is able to create a lot more lanes for the running back. So with Jalen Wright, with Dylan Sampson, it's hard to know what that's going to translate like in the NFL because Tennessee just plays a whole different offense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So who are you going to talk about next year, Austin? Who do you got next?
So next, I'm going to talk about the guy that is probably one of the most fun to talk about and very polarizing online. That's Cam Scatabo. He is just really exciting to watch. I mean, the way he makes plays, the joy he plays the game with, the way he bounces off people, the way he fires up his teammates. He's a guy that I think went from, this is a fun story, he'll probably be a fun undrafted free agent. Oh, maybe he might get drafted. So now I'm seeing him, mocked as high as the second round sometimes. So he's definitely, his stock has risen a lot. One of the knocks on him, I keep seeing people say he's too small, but he's 5'11", 216, which is bigger than Janty or Henderson. He literally is a human bowling ball, rolls over people, bounces off of people. his contact balance is just insane compared to, I think he might be the best in the class as far as just keeping his balance after being hit over and over again. So many different, and watching his highlights so many different times, it just feels like there's just no way he's going to get through this. And all of a sudden he's on the other side of it. I think those Iowa State and Texas games at the end of the year in the Big 12 championship and in the playoffs, where he just annihilated the competition, really put him on the national stage, put everyone on alert of who this guy is. Huge receiving threat, which I think is going to be huge fantasy perspective. He could have a role right away. I see him very much. I see a lot of Austin Eckler in him, honestly. I think that the ability to really like put himself in tight spaces, get those dirty short yards, but also like really good in space, really good catching the ball, good hands. So he had 45 catches last year, and that was to go along with his 2,300 total yards and 24 touchdowns. And those stats match up, basically stack up with anybody in this class other than Genty. And he was playing in the Big 12, still, one of the bigger conferences, against some good competition, like I said, against Texas, that many considered the best defensive line and secondary in the country. He was gashing them up. And so I definitely think that there's a lot to like there. And there, as a prospect, I think there's going to be some NFL GMs that really key on him and want him and have him higher on their boards. And all it takes is one to be like, we want to make this guy a feature piece of our offense for him to be an immediate fantasy star. And so I think that he's a guy that's probably going to be mid to late second in rookie drafts, at least as of now. That's kind of where he's going. But if he gets in a good landing spot, I could see him rising up to, an early second round pick and being a steal even there.
For sure. And I think one of the things that you had mentioned earlier was like basically being second to Genty in a lot of things. Actually, PFF had him rated as the second best runner in 2024 behind Genty. So he is a guy who just is exciting, but I agree that the draft capital, the landing spot is just the only concern, because at least right now where people are, and this is all projection, right? We have no idea until the draft happens. Is he's projecting it at late third, early fourth, and it's just because of some of these other guys that are going to climb up. It'll also really depend again on the combine that we're going to be watching here at the end of the month. What I really liked about Cam Skattebo is, like you mentioned, his pass catching ability. What we talked about the stat earlier, right? The missed tackles forced per attempt. He was second again behind Genty at 35% of his plays. And being able to go one-on-one against the defender and be able to be physical enough to get past that defender. So more so than a lot of these other prospects. But Skattebo is really interesting. 605 receiving yards, man. That's just and when you brought up Austin Eckler, that's a great comp. People are starting to forget that Austin Eckler was one of the best running backs back in his heyday with the Chargers. That he had basically he almost broke the record for rushing touchdowns in one of his years, and was leading the NFL at that time. So I love Cam Skattebo. As far as I've really grown on him, I wasn't really all in until we did a lot of the rookie tape, and I know you kind of covered it more, but I am definitely excited about him. Now,
I think like you said, I'm sorry, but I think like you said, one of the biggest questions is the draft capital, because if he ends up being a day 3 pick, he's mired in a deep backfield. It could be one of those situations where he doesn't really get a good chance. I still think the prospect profile shows that he has a potential to do do big things and if he gets an opportunity. But I definitely think there's going to be a big difference between him going day 2 and day 3. And I think that'll be a huge deciding factor with honestly a lot of guys in this range of where they end up going in rookie drafts.
Right. And that's not to say that anybody's dead if they go day 3, right? Because the other thing too is, talking back to Austin Eckler, he was behind Melvin Gordon in that backfield in Los Angeles. Well, San Diego, Los Angeles, wherever they were at that time, right?
Yeah, the Chargers.
And we saw with Tyrone Tracy and some of the other guys who've gone in the 5th round. It's like you get your opportunity, you get a physical specimen like Cam Skattebo. He might be able to really force his way into that lead back role. So I think he's a guy that people need to watch out for.
Yeah.
Going into my next guy, sharing into the Big 12. talking about Kansas running back Devin Neal. And Devin Neal is like the exact opposite running back that we're talking about compared to Cam Skattebo. That he's a small guy. I think what we see with him is he is a heavy pass catching back, and he's always been efficient in his career at Kansas. He's actually very much been a Kansas guy. So he's played all 4 years there, and he's actually been. He was one back that I found was he was Mr. Kansas when he was in high school. He's been dedicated to his home state. So
Yeah.
really good running back, really good seems like player that you wanna get behind. But one of his things, he's very similar to Hampton in that he's a good all-around back, so he doesn't really excel at one thing. He is a good pass catcher, but he is also good at being able to kind of find the lanes and be able to break into the second half of the field. And his speed is good, but what really helps him is that a lot of people say that he has good enough vision that he's able to see 2 steps ahead of the defense. And I think that's something that if you're looking again for a player like Dylan Sampson or Devin Neal in this sense, Travion Henderson, those are the guys that are going to be those change of pace back guys that are built now for this NFL. And it depends on the landing spot that they end up. But if they end up in a good spot, they could end up really skyrocketing up rookie draft boards. He looks natural in the pass game. They are concerns about his size, but the big thing is that people are just worried about whether he's workhorse material or not. And you know, but I plainly don't think that he's going to be a workhorse in the NFL. I'm just being honest at this point because we are getting towards kind of the second half of these guys that, you know, we were a little bit more sure about the top half of our prospects that we were talking about.
Yeah.
These guys are going to end up probably being more of hopefully a day 2 pick, but more likely a day 3 pick. And that's right now where Devin Neal's being projected. I think he's an exciting guy. He rushed for over 1,200 yards last year and caught 24 balls for 254 receptions. So again, he can handle the workload in college, but how is that going to translate to the NFL? That's the big part.
Right.
Were you able to look at all into Devin Neal? I know that this is getting a little bit more into the.
Yeah, no, I think that the thing that really stood out to me is how consistent he was. His stats were pretty consistent throughout his time there. It just seems like he's not like the most exciting prospect, not the most explosive prospect, but there's a lot of, you know, just kind of consistency. It wasn't the best offense that he was in, but he was able to find his spots and make plays. And I think that I know it's kind of, we keep saying it, but I do think he's going to be very landing spot dependent. Does he get into a good scheme where he's going to get good opportunities? But he's a guy that I like a lot, and I think that he has potential to be a breakout on whatever team he becomes part of.
I think I've seen some comps to Devin Singletary, like kind of in the prime of his career, and a little bit of Tony Pollard, which again, if you're looking at it and you see a situation like Tony Pollard in Dallas behind Zeke, that's kind of what you want to see from Devin Neal, that he could be this efficient back. Kind of in a running back by committee. So let's see. We're getting kind of towards the last couple backs here on our list, but
so I'm gonna stay in the Big 12. So I'm gonna talk about Ollie Gordon, who I think a lot of people talked about at this time last year as potentially being the number one. It was like, you know, he was up there with Genty and with Henderson and Judkins. So. But obviously he struggled a lot last year. And now we're talking about him more in the range of the RB 10 to 15. But I still really like Ollie Gordon. I think there's a lot to like. Watching I watched not only just his 2024 tape, but his 2023 tape. His 2023 tape is unbelievable. He looks unstoppable. And the thing that really stands out to me, really watching both years of tape, is his tackle breaking. The way he's able to break tackles is unbelievable. And 2023, he had over 2,000 total yards, 22 touchdowns. In 2024, he only had 880 yards and 13 touchdowns. But he did only have 190 carries. That's still a drop from 6 yards a carry to about 4.5. But the difference in the Oklahoma State team, a team that was a 10-win team in 2023 to a team that won 3 games in 2024. They were 0-9 in conference play. They didn't win a game after September 14th. So, and in some of those games, they lost by 40 points. So it's hard to be a running back and get opportunities to get in a rhythm when your team's getting blown out consistently. Um, the one game that they had, their one conference game they had that was a very tight game was a shootout with Texas Tech. It was 56-48, and he had 186 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. So I think we still saw some of that same explosiveness in games where they were competitive. He had a really good showing in the Senior Bowl. He actually threw a touchdown pass in the Senior Bowl on a trick play. His pass catching is a plus. He's not as quick as some of these other running backs, but he has the power to break tackles. He's tall. He's 6'2". We don't see that very often with running backs these days. But yeah, 225, big guy, breaks tackles, really hard to bring down. I could see him being a guy that if he ends up going in later parts of the draft, being more of a starting off his career as a TD merchant, short yardage guy. I see a little bit of Brian Robinson in his game, a little bit of James Conner. But the thing is, will he be able to have the speed, and will somebody trust him enough after the rough senior year that his draft capital doesn't drop too far that he becomes just a guy that's kind of a depth piece, or will he actually get an opportunity? Because I think if he actually does get an opportunity, his upside is about as high as anyone in this class. I mean, just the fact that, I know it's hard for people to even look back now, but I remember this time last year, a lot of people were talking about him being a potential, rookie pick 101 in 2025. And now we're talking about him as a second round pick. But I think there's definitely he still has that there. And I think there's a lot of things that you can use to explain why 2024 was such a struggle. The offensive line struggled, the offense as a whole struggled, and their defense was historically bad, which does affect a running back because if you're getting blown out, you have to kind of abandon the run. So those things all combine. I do think definitely, his efficiency went down and he didn't play as well. So I'm not trying to just excuse it all away. But there is some supporting reasons why that makes you think that he might be closer to the 2023 Ellie Gordon than he was to what we saw in 2024.
He might be a hidden gem for a lot of rookie drafts going into like the late second, like into the third round. It's just it's one of those things that at that point you're looking for upside, and Ollie Gordon has a lot greater upside than some of the other guys that we're kind of talking about towards the end here. And I absolutely agree. The thing is, you can't just discount 2023 by saying because of his 2024 year, but at the same time, you also can't forget how inefficient he was in 2024. So I think you take a lot of that baggage and you hope for the best. And when you invest a second or third round rookie pick, you're going for the upside. So I like Ollie Gordon as well, Austin. I think that's a great guy to talk about. And we're just going to stick with the Big 12 here for my last guy. We'll bring up some honorable mentions, but the last guy I wanted to talk about was DJ Giddens. And DJ Giddens was another running back who basically played his whole career at Kansas State. Was a junior out of Kansas State. Good size for a running back, not the most powerful runner, and not great with contact. Where he really excels is his great vision and great patience. So, you talk about some of the qualities that Lev Bell had, who was elite at doing those things. Not saying DJ Giddens is Lev Bell, but if he could at least take some of that, the vision and the patience of a running back that can have that, I mean, you're looking for that with, again, a late second, early, like really going into the third round in your rookie draft. He's elusive and shifty. His pass catching profile is excellent, and he has a really good route tree that he had coming from Kansas State. So, I think he's a guy that you can look to again in those late rounds. He rushed for over 1,200 yards in 2023 and kept consistently with over 1,300 yards in 2024 and caught 21 balls for 251 receiving yards in last year. So his yards per carry were around 11.1 yards per reception in 2023, and then 12.3 yards per reception in 2024. So, get him out in the open space, throw the ball to him, and he's gonna at least let your fantasy team feed. And I think feast. And I think the upside is there, but again, this is a late guy that we're talking about that you're just taking a shot on. So, did you get in,
Yeah.
looking into DJ Giddens at all, Austin?
Yeah, so he's an interesting guy. I think that I've seen some mocks with him going at the end of the third, but I've seen some that have him, he's going to be a late day three pick. So that's obviously going to matter a lot. But he was just a very consistent college performer. I mean, you talked about him going for 1,200 in 23 and then 1,300 in 24. But he was, he rushed for over 1,000 more yards, but he actually got less carries. So his yards per carry went up from 5.5 to 6.6 between
Yeah.
his sophomore and junior year. And so I think that you're looking at a guy that's consistently gotten better each season, had a lot of consistency, been able to stay healthy. I think that he's a guy that could be a good contributor to a committee in the NFL. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
he could be a guy that is a good sleeper. But I just think it's so hard to kind of, when you're getting in this range, once you get beyond the top 5, 6, 7 guys, it's really going to come down to, who, where these guys get drafted, who sneaks up into there. We got, the guys we're not even going to be able to talk about today, like Woody Marks and, Blue from Texas. And if some of these guys randomly get drafted at the end of the second or the third, it's like all of a sudden they catapult up.
Yeah.
And some of these guys we're talking about today that end up going fifth, sixth, seventh round, they may be dropping into the, late rookie picks. So it's tough to say. It's tough to do some of this analysis pre-draft, but I think just looking at the pure prospect profiles, Giddens is a guy I really like. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
So, I think you brought up a good point there, Austin. Like, I think this show was really just, we were just wanting to put this out to get our listeners really into starting to look into these guys and watching them come into the combine and get excited about what we're going to see out of these next few months leading up to the rookie draft. And so some of the honorable mentions of guys that, are going to possibly go late, or they could even jump up in early depending on how they perform and where they end up getting drafted. Jordan James out of Oregon, junior, split the backfield in 2023 with Bucky Irving. Had really good stats last year. Again, over 1,200 yards rushing, and was also good at catching the ball. Brashard Smith, who is actually my guy for one of our fellows at the Dynasty Dog Mike, senior from SMU, with a Miami transfer in 2024, gives a little bit of Tyrone Tracy, some James Cook vibes, but he was a wide receiver turned running back, and so those are some of the other things you want to look into with some of the other prospects that are coming out this year. Another guy that I really like, and actually was having a little bit of a conversation with my brother-in-law who covers USC football, Woody Marks, who was a fifth-year senior and transferred from Mississippi State the previous year. I get some vibes of Darren Sproles. A lot of shiftiness, could be a three-down back, though, at the same time, and has really good pass-catching ability. And then the last guy who I included on this list was Damian Martinez from Miami.
Yeah,
transferred from Oregon State and had a pretty decent pass-catching profile and had a pretty good Senior Bowl this season, just a couple of months ago. So really, really cool running back class that we're seeing here. Definitely very deep. I think what we're seeing compared to the previous year was we just saw such a wide receiver heavy class last year that we're seeing a really heavy running back class this year. And there's a lot of time to pick your poison. So we, for the listeners, just get into it. Do a little bit of review yourself. We wanted to maybe take a little bit of the guesswork out, but at the same time, I think the best thing for you to do is also look into some of these guys and kind of start to create your rankings of where you see them. Any other thoughts?
Because you think about some of these. You have R.J. Harvey from UCF, undersized guy, but explosive runner. You got Rocket Sanders. He was considered a top prospect at Arkansas last year. Transferred to South Carolina. Had kind of similar to Ollie Gordon, kind of a down year, but still a lot of upside there. And then Donovan Edwards. He was right there with Blake Corum on that Michigan championship team. Got the cover of NCAA 25. A lot of hype around him. He had a little bit of a disappointing season as well. Yeah. But he's a great prospect. But he's not even making our honorable mention section. That's how deep this class is. And if all it takes is one NFL GM to be like, I actually like RJ Harvey. I actually like Donovan Edwards better than some of these guys we mentioned, and all of a sudden they're a day two pick, and that completely changes, I think, the way we're viewing this. Because a lot of the lens that we're viewing these guys from right now, I think, is based on what we're seeing in mocks. But like you said, with the
100%.
combine, with all the stuff coming up, like that could all change very quickly, and we could be seeing some of these other guys. Yeah, Damian Martinez is another guy I really like. Woody Marks is very interesting. So I'm excited for these next 2 weeks, next few months leading up to the draft and just seeing how it all
Yeah,
shakes out. But yeah, this is a fun
for sure.
class.
And Austin and I are having fun right now, just doing some tape review. Next, we're going to be covering wide receivers, and after that, hopefully we get some time in for the tight ends and QBs. But the wide receivers, I think, are going to be interesting, right? It's not as deep as the
Oh,
running back class, and it's also not as
no.
lauded right now as the running back class. But I
Yeah.
think there's some sleepers that I've been already seeing, and so yeah, excited to get into a little bit of that. Right now, we have a listener league startup draft going on right now, which has been really fun with some of our listeners. And another thing, if you haven't joined our Discord yet, I'll try and
Yeah.
drop the link down in the comments, at least in the bio, for this episode, and join us. You know, we have
Yeah.
a growing community of guys and gals that want to help you at least really rule your league and help with trades, help with picks and startups, different various things that you might need assistance
Yeah.
with. And it's fun to just banter. I mean, we were the other
Yeah.
night we were just having some banter about who the RB1 is
Yeah.
of the NFL right now, and I have a little bit of Lions bias, but I think Gibbs and Bijan are right there. But we're just having fun talking
Yeah.
about different
Yeah.
stuff, and I think the Discord is a great place to break that down.
Yeah. And we'll have, I'm sure we'll have a bunch more rookie mocks that people will have a chance to be a part of and
100%.
kind of build some ADP and get an idea of where people are going. So that'll be something else you can mock with us, and well, it's a good time. You should definitely check it out.
Awesome, Austin. Well, we'll get back into the rookie tape here with the wide receivers, but I will see you on the next one, sir.
Yep, sounds good. You too, man.